Hello and welcome back to the evaluation series of videos. In today's video, I'm going to concentrate on some of the CLI or command line interface importing of data. And specifically, I want to concentrate on importing network elements, meaning importing routers and their information pertinent to discovery that I can then use IPControl to discover subnets that are attached to the routers or switches if they're layer 3. And we do that through a process called network elements in IPControl under management. And those network elements can represent either layer 3 switches or layer 3 routers, depending on how your function's used. A couple core things you need to understand here at this point. When we look at the network elements and we go in to set up the type, either by switch or router, whatever vendor appears in the list and their exact spelling, including the different models, is what we need to ensure of when we import this data. So the importing itself will be done through the command line interface because it's one of the few that we don't have already available in the import wizard, but it's something that is relatively maintained once. You import the wizard or import the bulk routers and then you update those individually through API or other means. So also you'll need in the IPControl executive access to the network elements under management, IPAM, network elements and devices. You'll need the ability to either add, delete, or edit. You'll also need the CLI API documentation if you want to kind of follow it along in terms of what columns mean what and what data attributes. I highly recommend looking at that while you have that up, and I have mine here as well that we'll be stepping through in the process. And you need to have the ability to log into your executive, whether you're SSHing into it as an executive Sapphire appliance or Linux. You'll need SSH access as Inc admin, and on Windows, you'll need to have some type of administrative access to run the command line. So I'm going to cover the Linux and the virtual appliance today. If there's any need for the Windows, we'll follow up. But same field structure, different syntax in terms of the command and capabilities. So to begin with, if we take a look at our network elements under management network elements, and if you do an add network element, we're going to find certain attributes within this screen that are going to map directly to the screens that they're going to have for the import facility. There is also on your IPControl executive, if you SCP to your server, and if you CD to opt in control etc/CLI/templates, there are a number of CSV and XLS template files that you can use that map, again, back to the instruction and import, and also by column, so you can see in certain aspects documentation, and then also the ability to save it out as CSV. In the end, anything we add, we're going to save as CSV, and that's how we import data through IPControl. Some of these can be done through the web UI wizard. Again, this is done through the CLI, which we'll go through in just shortly. So what you'll want to do initially is go ahead and open up your file, and we're going to go ahead and create effectively a template file that's going to be used for the import. And I see that I'm outside my capture area here, so one second. And in this file, when you open up the XLS, you'll have effectively your column headers. These column headers should map up to the data columns in the CLI document. Now what I'm doing, and a couple key things here is, A, the IP address of these systems must always be unique. So what I just did before this video is I created a name and I just dragged this down to 100 cells. So I have 99 cells there. And then I did the same thing with the IP address, and it just auto-populated the last octet down to .99. So that's what we're going to use for the import here. Now I have also gone in and set up in the Cisco Systems vendor a router type called ALAB Cisco model. Okay, to show you that real quick, what you'll do in terms of adding those vendors is you'll look at the tools, vendor models, find your vendor. So if you're looking like I am for Cisco, you would see Cisco Systems. This vendor name is what gets populated into this spreadsheet under the vendor. So it needs to be the exact spelling as well. And then you can look at edit models. And here you can filter it out by type. So if I wanted to look at just router types, they would show us what models are defined. And here's one of my lab ones. So I can do add model and tell it the type of this is a router. And we might want to say this is the B-Lab Cisco router. I already have a B-Lab switch, so I'm going to call this router. Okay. And then when it comes into the sorting, that's why I put it up here in the top with this, so it'll be at the list. Now that name also needs to be supplied in the Excel spreadsheet when we talk about the model. If it's anything other than that, you need to go in and create a model for it or use one of the existing models defined and use it in its full syntax and text because it's very specific about this. The other part of the import was the agent name. Now, if you omit this, it assumes that you're going to be importing into the executive or that you're not going to have an agent at all. So what we want to have in here, when you define the router, at the very end of the selection is going to be the agent. So let's go down into the network elements. And let's just look at this real quick. And what I mean by the agent is at the bottom of the setting where collection agent is, you have add agent, and this will show you all of the Sapphire appliances or the executive that are defined. The executive would be the default, so you would use executive space agent as that name. So here in ours, we're going to do just that. We'll do executive agent, and let's just copy that. Control V that. Okay, so now we've got executive agent. I could tell it to automatically sync, so I can run a specific task under the management discovery that allows us to look at the full task or the collect global utilization of network elements, global synchronization of network elements. So that check flag here represents that task flag within the network element. So if you want that set, you can. For S&P version, it's V1, 2, or 3. I'm using V2. However, note that if you're using V3, that you'll need to ensure you have all of the credentials, that you have the type of encryption, the authenticating protocol, and the context. So there's a few things that you'll need here based on your environment and your settings. Now, if you're using just V2, V2C is effectively what this is. So that is how you would define V2. And then we only need the read-only string. We don't need enabling strings. So whatever the read-only is for that particular device that we can discover. The S&P timeout is in milliseconds, so 2,000ths, 2 seconds. The S&P retry is 2, so it's going to retry 2 times at 2 seconds. The other fields we see here are for your V3, which we just mentioned. The interface list can also be imported if you know all of the details up front, meaning you know the interface name and you know its status. If that's the case, there is the ability to do that, which is defined in that documentation. So there's a caret hyphenation. Basically, it says name caret status. If you want to import the VRF name, you can also do that at this time if it's a non-model, non-Nexus model that we would discover. I recommend if you have the ability to discover to do it through that process. The reason being is we'll go out through that discovery, pull the actual interface name and any of its slash notation, since it can be quite long for instances of serial and other interface types, and let it fill it in for you. And then by doing so, it'll also tell you whether enabled, disabled, and attach the various subnets to them. So the end of this list, but keep this, I'd probably keep it empty and discover it, but if you need to do this, go ahead and fill in the interface list and separate them in this list, and you can do that. The S&P sys type information is done through the collection. That'll set automatically. These are read-only strings. And it doesn't show you this in the Excel document I pulled off of there, but there's 3 more fields: username, password, and subnet collection. This is specific to SSH collections only. And I'm telling it here in the subnet collection to use S&P. If it were SSH, I'd use SSH. Okay. So that is, effectively what you have, and everything else then is the same. So what we're going to do in this, and I've already copied it, I'm just going to go ahead and save this again as a CSV. I'm going to go ahead and save it in my import files directory. Let's go ahead and save the default first. It's already on there. Let's do save as CSV. Okay, now I'm going to close this. And then from there, you'll need to transfer that file over to your executive system. So before I do that, I'm just going to rename this. And I'm going to copy this up, and then from here, I want to copy it into just the temp directory. So in the remote system, we'll do temp // and that should be done. Okay, so now to actually run that command, you're going to want to SSH into your IPControl executive and log in as Inc. admin. And you'll need your password for it as well. Once you're there, you'll cd2/opt/incontrol/etc/CLI. And that will get you into where the command lines are, and there's a number of import-export type commands. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to want to run an import on the CSV we just created. So we want to use the import network element. And if you tab that, it should fill in complete. And I'm going to go ahead and just give it an invalid syntax to have it pull up its syntax. This then should match when we look at the syntax in the documentation how that is run. So the command line arguments, the switches, and the verbosity, etc. So if we're happy with all of that, we're going to do import network element. And I'm just going to leave that. We'll do import, actually this is a VM. And then I'm going to tell it a reject file, which I'm going to call basically the same thing, just reject.csv. And then I want to give it an error output to tell me what the errors are. And I like to name all of mine the same. That way, if I'm looking at them, I know which tasks they are, which they're related to. And now hitting enter on this, of course, if you don't pass it on the command line, you'll need to specify it. And you'll need to have access rights to import the details. But of course, once it's done, 100 routers only takes a few seconds, maybe 15, maybe 10. That was even quicker than last. And then when we look back at IPControl, you're going to then see in that network element list, we'll see all of those routers. And if we go in and actually access any of them and edit them, we should have all of the details that we specified, including the agent and so forth within the import file. Okay, so that's I'm going to leave the video with that, and I'm going to come back with another video showing you now the next steps, which would be to attach the network element to the container. So we'll go through the import container CLI that will then populate this on the hierarchy. All right, thanks, take care, and join you back for the next video shortly.